All right, guys, welcome to the Fish North Georgia podcast. I'm Danny Pruitt, your host. We're in-house today with an old friend, Andy Middleton.
What's going on,
What's going on? And Andy's been on before, and wanted to touch base with him. I guess it's been a couple years.
It's been a little while, yeah. Things have happened.
Things have happened. Life has changed. So, you guys, if you're watching on YouTube, go back and check out Andy's old podcast. I would say, was that pre-COVID?
I don't remember if it was pre-COVID or not. I know we talked about the Georgia Bass Slam pretty in-depth on that one.
Yeah, it's been a while. But anyway, it's on YouTube. Go check it out. But we've got a new one for you today. And if you're listening on iTunes and Spotify, hey, we love you guys too. So, Andy, let's get started. How's life been treating you since we talked last?
Life's going well. Still doing the kayak tournament thing and raising boys here in Jasper.
How many kids you got now?
I got two. Still two.
How old?
I got
still
one.
Two. Did you have two the last time we talked?
I believe I did.
Okay,
yeah.
You might have. Man, I'm getting old.
I got a 6-year-old and one that's about to turn 4 next week.
Are you getting any gray hairs from that?
Look at that.
Yeah, I've telling
had gray hair.
Yeah, I'm telling you. Listen, it only gets a little more fun as you go along. You know, wait till they start driving and all that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. So anyway, still fishing, still doing
fishing.
the kayak, kayak stuff. What's going on in the kayak world these days?
Man, it's still growing. A lot of kayaks are being sold. You walk the floor at ICAST or something like that, and you see a lot of kayaks out on the floor. I didn't get to go this year. I did last year. But anyway, yeah, it's growing. And Bassmaster, with their hiring of Steve Owens as the tournament director, season director here locally, they've stepped in and given Hobie a run for their money as one of the top-tier kayak trails. So we got two really, really good kayak trails on the scene now with Bassmaster and the Hobie BOS, and still got KBF out there. They're kind of behind those two, in my opinion, now, a little more in that BFL type range if you want to go with the bass boat equivalent. But yeah, it's growing. Still got a lot of good local trails.
All right, I might have asked you this on the last one,
okay,
but I'm going to ask you again. At what point does a kayak become a boat?
Well, I would say when it's not plastic.
When it's not plastic?
If it's plastic, it's still going to be a kayak, unless it's one of those little bass raiders that two people sit in side by side and pedal around or whatever. But
the guys are spending a ton of money on kayaks now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing them decked out. They look like mini bass boats with all the technology on it.
And you're seeing that come into the tournament world a lot too, especially with the advent of one of the bigger trails being Bassmaster, allowing motors in the tournaments. And then a lot of the local trails have transitioned over to allowing motors as well. And so you've got the option, if you want to run a motor, to put the lithium battery in there and put the motor mount on there and put the motor on there and add that 50 or 60 extra pounds to your kayak if you want to make long runs, or if you're lazy or whatever.
If you're lazy. I like how you threw that in there. If you're lazy.
Yeah, that's
Is that a dig?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. I understand. What kind of kayak do you run?
But we'll talk strategy later, so it's not that big of a dig, but it is a little bit.
It is of a dig. What kind of kayak you running these days?
I'm actually got two now. I've got a Hobie Pro Angler 12 360 and a Hobie iTrack 11.
Okay.
It's an inflatable boat.
An inflatable boat?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever fish the inflatable in a tournament, or is that just something for you to get in certain places?
I have. Usually I use the inflatable for short trips, like overnight trips. It's kind of a grab-and-go type kayak, but I have fished one tournament out of it on the Okmulgee last month.
Okay.
And it worked out fine. I've added some H-rails to it on the sides to make it a little more tournament-friendly for getting the measurements and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, and so what tournaments are you personally fishing right now? What trails?
I'm fishing a little bit of the Bassmaster Kayak Series, the national level one, and then the state level, I'm fishing the Georgia Bass Nation as well, and a little bit of Peach State. With my schedule, with the kids and everything, I can't really chase an AOI title in any of these trails because there's so many scheduling conflicts. So I just try to look at the ones that I think look fun or ones I think I can do well in and try to jackpot, and that's where I go. So I kind of jump around.
Okay, tell me a little bit about the national trail with bass.
It was 5 events this year.
Okay.
It was sort of a trial basis. Bassmaster's been doing a national kayak trail for about 3 years, but up until this year, you haven't heard very much about it. It was not promoted all that great, all that widely, and they show interest, and they have a genuine interest in the kayak scene and want to see it grow. And by doing that, they kind of put their money where their mouth is last fall by hiring Steve as the director, and it's just exploded this year onto the scene. The first tournament was Guntersville, and there were 230 something anglers in that.
That's
tournament.
what I was getting to ask you. How many on when you get to a national tournament, the size of the field? So that one was 200 plus.
That one was a little bit of an anomaly because it was the first tournament of the season. Everybody's chomping at the bit to get out there. Everybody's excited about Steve-O being a director.
Yeah.
And it's on Guntersville, so it's like ground zero for bass fishing.
Right.
So, yeah, 230, 240 anglers at that one. And then subsequent events, you had around 115, I think, at Hartwell. And then they're, around 100, 120, 130 at each event, pretty much.
That's still a big field.
It's a good field.
And the cool thing, now, again, it depends on which side of the ball you land on. You guys use the measurement.
Correct.
You got your boards. I tried that. I don't know if you heard through the grapevine about me actually trying to measure.
I saw you out on Lanier. I think I saw a video of you out on Lanier in a kayak one day.
I actually did. I will say this. It is fun.
Yes.
It is different, though.
Sure.
But the measuring of the fish, if you don't know what you're doing, that can be a catastrophe. And that's what it was for me. I didn't know the little nuances of angling the board down with the net. Yeah, and so my very first spot that I caught, first of all, they're just pissed off little fish.
Spots are a difficult one to break yourself in with.
Yeah, it was. Trying to get the mouth closed, get it, there's certain ways you guys have to measure, I'll let you kind of go over that here in a second. But let's just say my fish flew back in the water. Right. And I never got the picture. But for somebody that's not into the kayak scene, let's talk real quickly about how a fish is weighed or whatever you guys call it. Measured in.
Okay, so we use an app on our smartphones called TourneyX for most of our tournaments. The old school way, you take your pictures on either a digital camera or on your phone, and you show up back at the meeting after the tournament, show them to the tournament director. They write all your measurements down on a piece of paper and add them up.
That's the old way.
That's the old school way, Just, and I say old school when I say that. I mean, 6, 8, 10 years ago, not that long ago.
Right.
But TourneyX, the app came out a few years ago, and most of the major trails and actually most of the local trails have gone to TourneyX now. And like I said, it's an app on your phone. You upload your photos to it, and then somebody reviews them as they come in. Your photos in there will have your geo tag on it, so they know and a timestamp and all that, so they know you're fishing on the right body of water, within the boundaries, the right time of day. So there's a lot of things built into that app that would prevent somebody from doing something shady.
Right. So that's a good thing. What is it about kayak fishing from a kayak, that you love?
Well, for me, I was a old whitewater guy in high school and college. I whitewater kayaked.
That's right. I remember that now.
Yeah, I was in a club in high school, like an adventure club in high school, and had somebody, a mentor, a teacher at school that taught us the ropes on paddling, taught us the right paddle strokes, taught us how to read rivers, and that's why I kind of kind of shift my eyes a little bit when people talk motors and stuff like that. Because I come from the whitewater background, and I've been kayaking for 25 years. So I've been fishing for 40 years.
Right.
So once I realized that people were fishing from these things, it was kind of a natural move for me. I sold my whitewater boat to buy my first fishing kayak, and just really haven't looked back from there. I've owned a couple of fishing ski boat, 18-foot fishing ski boats, and I've sold them both.
Just like it so much more.
I do, and people, a a lot of people is like, well, why don't you just buy a boat? Well, you can't fish a kayak tournament from a boat.
True.
And
right.
And they don't realize some people would just rather kayak fish.
Yeah. The cool thing, I always say you kayak guys are a different breed. Some of you are a little strange, but most of you're all great guys. But I always say a little bit different breed. But the cool thing is, you guys get to fish in places that a boat will not go.
Right, and that's one of the things that differentiated us a lot as a sport, or as a sector of the sport, even on the competitive side. And some of the rule changes that have went into effect this year have kind of homogenized us a little bit more with the bass boat side.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with taking a kayak out on a ledge on Guntersville and dragging a football jig or whatever. If that's where the fish are, then that's what you want to do.
Right.
But there are certain things that some of them have done that have taken a little bit of the strategy we used to use to get back into the remote areas. That's kind of taken it out of the game a little bit.
Right.
Or you have to strategize differently to get to those areas.
Right, and we're going to get to that strategy. But, I look at the social media pictures that you guys put up.
Yeah.
And it's some of the most beautiful places that the state of Georgia and the surrounding Southeast has to offer.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of river fishing and, a lot of shoals. I know a lot of you guys like to go down there and fish for those shoal bass, down on the Flint. Is it the Flint, Okmulgee?
The Flint and the Okmulgee, and then the upper Chattahoochee up in Cleveland, White County.
Yeah. And that's places that bass boat guys are not going to get into.
No.
And some of those, we talked about when you were on the last time, the Georgia Slam.
Yeah.
We'll mention that real briefly, but some of those waters that you have to go chase these particular fish, real skinny water, just different, that you're not going to get in a boat.
It's like something you would see a trout angler in, except you're fishing for these different species of bass, black bass, rather than the stream chickens.
Stream chickens.
Yeah.
Okay, explain for somebody who don't know what a stream chicken is.
A trout, a stalker trout.
A stalker trout. I have not heard that, so there you go. That's a good way of putting it. I call them snits, your standard 9-inch trout. Yeah. Real briefly, since I just mentioned some of the most beautiful places in Georgia and the Southeast, tell me a few places that you've actually fished in a kayak, just to kind of give the viewer, the audience a feel of where you have fished recently.
Recently?
Or just, in the past year or two.
Okay. Well, I mean, if you're talking about beautiful places, we've got nice places to fish all over, and even things that you wouldn't even realize that are in your backyard, like the Upper Etowah River.
Right.
It's a beautiful float. Like anything from Dawsonville down to Canton is going to be a beautiful float.
That's right.
You got WMAs that you're floating through, and it's just there's not very many houses on it, and stuff like that. And then I've been as far north as Pennsylvania on the Susquehanna, and that's a gorgeous float.
Really?
Yeah.
What took you up there?
There was a tournament. Hobie BOS had a tournament up there. Well, they have one there about every year. Bass is having one there this year, too. It's the last one left on the schedule. But smallmouth bass.
Smallmouth, okay.
Smallmouth bass in current. It's the river's about a mile wide, and it's knee-deep.
Really?
Yeah. And
how do smallmouth fight in that current?
Just about like you'd expect them to if you've caught a smallmouth.
Yeah. They kind of like, they've got that spot aggression to them a little bit.
Right.
Of all the 3 species I've caught, to me the largemouth fights the least.
I would agree.
Of the smallmouth and the spots. A lot of spotted bass in Etowah.
Yeah, Alabama bass.
Alabama bass, okay. South Georgia, if you get on down that way, you're looking at largemouth and shoal bass.
The shoal bass is going to be middle Georgia for the most part. There are some shoal bass in South Georgia if you're fishing the Flint up above Bainbridge, like in the headwaters of Seminole. Okay. There are shoal bass in there as well.
Of the 3 species, what's your favorite? Actually 4, since we're adding shoal bass. So you got largemouth, shoal bass, spots, and smallmouth. What's your favorite?
I really love smallmouth fishing. I don't know if it's one of those things where it's something you can't really find around here that much, and that is what makes the intrigue go up for the smallmouth, or the fact that they're beautiful fish or they fight hard. There's just something about a smallmouth I love, and I'm not very good at it. The smallmouth tournaments I've been in, I'm not done well, but I love to catch them nonetheless.
Still fun. Still fun. All right, now we talked a little bit about the national trail. Now the local, I guess that was the Hobie. That's the more regional. Is Hobie?
No, Hobie is a national trail.
Hobie's
as well.
national.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you won a tournament recently. What was that in?
The tournament I won recently was Lake Hartwell, and that was Georgia Bass Nation.
Georgia Bass Nation. Okay.
That tournament was held in conjunction with the national trail.
Mm-hmm.
The national trail was 2 days, Saturday, Sunday. The state trail was only 1 day, just the Saturday, and I won the Saturday portion of it.
All right, so how many inches did you have?
97.
All right, so 97 inches, kind of for us, weighing guys, kind of give me a ballpark close to estimate on that.
When you go on Tourney X and hover your mouse over the total inches, it's going to give you a calculated weight conversion. I don't believe what they gave me for that one because they gave me about 22 pounds. I think they're using largemouth for those calculations. But I had 2 largies and 3 Alabama bass.
Yeah.
And it was post spawn for the largemouth. So when I did my own guess, I guessed about 19 and a half pounds.
That's a hell of a bag.
It was a fun day.
It was a fun day.
Yeah,
I bet. And you got a little money off of it, right?
I did.
There you go. That's it. That makes it even better. One of the reasons that I wanted to bring you back in, I'm very intrigued about strategies. And
Okay.
we kind of brought that up a little bit. When I see guys on these big lakes, bass boat guys, they go out, they do a lot of pre-fishing. You guys, do you get a pre-fish time?
We do.
You do? So what are the kind of standards for, like, the amount of time you can pre-fish a lake? Do you have a time off as well?
Yeah, there's an off limits.
Okay.
On the big trails, on Hobie and Bass got together, and KBF actually. They all three got together and kind of had a powwow before the season to try to standardize some of the rules, and off limits period was one of the rules that they looked at. And so I believe it, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's 21 days before the tournament starts.
Off limits.
It'll go off limits.
Wow.
until like the Saturday before the tournament, and then
Okay.
you get like 5 or 6 days practice.
Okay. So it's pretty similar to kind of some of the bass
Yeah,
trails
and then
out there.
once that 5 days of official practice starts, you also got a no info rule during that period.
No info. Okay.
And before that 21, you can't you can use a guide up to that 21 days, and then after that, you can't talk to a guide or use a guide.
Have y'all had any controversy with that in any of the tournaments you fished?
I mean, there's always talk that goes around.
Yeah.
Every once in a while you hear something, but nothing blatant that I can think of as far as somebody getting info.
Yeah, it's kind of tough.
I'm sure it happens.
Yeah.
Because the way the rule is worded, they don't let you solicit info, so you're not going to call up somebody and say, "Hey, give me these waypoints or give me the juice right now." But you may be out there practicing, and old Billy Bob on his dock says, "Hey, I caught one on a square bill over here the other day, about 3 pounds." What are you going to do then? Because you're not soliciting that info.
But
Guys
you hear it.
shooting the breeze with you,
Owning a tackle shop, I've noticed that tournament guys can come in here and they don't solicit. But if conversations are going on around them, that's in that little bit of a gray area. They're not soliciting it, but they can listen to that.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
you
fair.
can overhear it.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of nuance in that. If you think that you're hearing something that's really going to give you an advantage or something like that, you probably need to tell your tournament director.
Yeah.
And if you're open with them and honest about it, they're probably not going to
Right.
they're probably not going to DQ you for something like that, something you overhear. But if you're calling up, if you got a tournament on Lanier and you're calling up Jimbo and Rob Jordan and everybody else, then that's not right.
So still got to have a little bit of morality involved.
Sure.
In that, a little bit of honesty. So that's
and
good.
and that's a lot. And when they went back in the off season and focused, put a little microscope on some of these rules, that's the integrity and gray areas and stuff like that's what they're kind of trying to cut out.
Yeah, well, we've just noticed in the news there's been a lot of disqualifications lately on the big trails.
Yeah.
Of course, you got the walleye guys that just stupidly put 400 pounds of weight, in their fish.
Yeah.
That's a whole
and those
nother
are
thing.
the easy ones to
Yeah,
catch.
right.
People cut a tail off a bass and, try to put their hand over it when they measure it. Or
I imagine it goes on, but I just, I don't know. But good thing is they at least are trying to be a little proactive on it and, keep it out away as much, as possible.
Yeah, they're trying to standardize things and put us on as much of an equal playing field as they can.
Yeah.
Some people may have a lighter kayak. Some people, like me with my PA, I'm carrying 150, 170 pounds out there on the lake.
Mm-hmm.
And I may not want to get in skinny water that day.
Right.
But somebody else may be carrying a 45 to 60 pound kayak with 2 rods and 1 tackle box. And, they can get into an area of skinny water that somebody else can't. So there's only so much standardization that you can have in kayak fishing. But with some of the rules that they've enacted this year, it's at least putting us on the same body of water.
Well, let's talk about some of those rules. Give me a couple examples of rule changes while we're talking strategy and how it kind of plays into the strategies.
Well, we've talked about the off limits and the no info.
Right.
So that was put into place this year to prevent people that that may not have another job or something like that. Like some of these Bassmaster Opens anglers, kind of in the same deal. Like they can show up a month before a tournament on Lake Eufaula or whatever, practice 3 straight weeks, get everything dialed in, and you have other anglers coming in 3 days before the tournament that's only there for official practice.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have official practice. We have an off limits and official practice. So everybody, you may still be at a little disadvantage of people that are there for 4 days rather than 2 days or something like that.
Right.
But it's making it a little more.
It at least kind of eliminates that guy just from sitting on a lake for a month.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that's a good rule. What about? Is there any other rules? You kind of mentioned a little dig with the motors.
Yeah,
motor rules.
There's one thing that's starting to get into one of the big rule changes and a little bit of strategy change.
Mm-hmm.
So they went to designated launches this year,
which has been a thing that's not been that way in the past.
It's not necessarily been that way in the past. Now, in the past, there's never been a situation where you could launch from private property. Like if you go, let's say you go to Guntersville and you're in an Airbnb on the lake, you can't launch in the tournament from the backyard of that Airbnb because it's not a public launch. The other 200 people could not launch from that ramp like they could from Goose Pond or somewhere like that.
So it has to be a public ramp.
Right.
Okay.
So it has to be public put in. Now, a lot of the skinny water guys and the creek guys and the river guys, like me, and some of my buddies, part of the fun of it was trying to find these off the beaten path launches where it was just a bridge, on a public right of way.
Yep.
Everything's legal about it.
Yep.
It's public right of way, but you like drag down a bank into a creek or a backwater, and you go in there and you catch those unpressured resident fish for the tournament, and it's all it's contiguous water with the lake. Or maybe is it or is it not contiguous water with the lake? Because sometimes you go far up a creek or something like that, you may not know that 5 miles downstream before you get to the lake there's a beaver dam that you couldn't get over, or a lowhead dam that, if you were coming from the lake, you couldn't paddle up that.
Yeah.
Or motor up it.
Right.
Or anything like that. So, you could find one of these obscure launches, 15, 20 miles up a creek or something, and you have perfectly navigable water where you launch, but you may not know what's downstream of you back toward the lake.
Gotcha.
And so they've done a published launch list for these bigger trails this year. Like Bassmaster and Hobie are both doing it. They got a published launch list. So let's say Lake Lanier.
Okay.
If you wanted to go fish way up the Chestatee, then you might have to launch at Lumpkin County Park and motor your butt up the Chestatee if you want to go catch shoal bass.
I got you.
Instead of putting in at 400 or something. And
which is about, as a float, 4 or 5 miles up.
I don't know how far it is.
But it's a little poke.
Yeah. So that's where your strategy comes in, and I kind of equate that to somebody, let's say, the Sabine River tournament for Bassmaster. Some of those guys will get in the boat and go out to the Intercoastal and run all the way to Galveston from Orange, Texas, which I don't know how long. That's a couple hours or whatever.
Yeah, it's a long ride.
So they've got this risk-reward mindset of, okay, I'm going to run this 2 hours, and not knowing exactly maybe what the tide's doing or something like that, and it's only going to leave me 4 hours to fish the tournament.
Right, because you got 2 hours back.
My bass population is stupid and better, and I've got a better chance to catch 10 or 12 pounds in Galveston than I do in Orange.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll take that risk. That's kind of the same thing that we have to do now. If we want to go up a creek or a river, we're going to have to launch out near the main lake, and you may have to motor or paddle or pedal 5-10 miles to your spot rather than finding a bridge and just dumping in
right there.
But that takes the question out of whether you can actually get there from the main lake.
Okay, so I understand now how that would work in your strategy.
Yeah.
Do you like that rule?
At first I didn't. When I was pretty upset about it at first, because that's part of the fun of it for us river guys, is finding those obscure launches and getting to those unpressured fish. But from a tournament director standpoint, which I have been before,
mm-hmm.
I really understand it, because that's one of those things that if somebody questions an angler on that, they're going to have to go back to the lake after the tournament, launch somewhere on the main lake, take their kayak up that river or that creek and film it and prove to them after the fact that they were able to get up there.
Yeah.
Which is just, it's just too much. And that's why they put those launches, the launch list, close to the main lake. And I was skeptical about it at first. I didn't like it at first, but once I saw the list that Steve-O put together for Gunnersville and saw some of those familiar launches way back in South Saudi or some of the other creeks,
mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, they're not trying to cut us creek and river guys completely out of the equation. They're just making it where they know you can get there from the main lake and you're still fishing on the same body of water.
Okay, I understand that. Yeah, that makes sense. And it does kind of level the playing field a little bit. Everybody, if you're going to make I say level, like you said, you've got to make a decision.
Yeah.
Do I want to make that run? Do I want to fish around the launch?
And this rule was made because something happened, last year at Pickwick.
Oh, really?
Pickwick's got a lot of long feeder creeks.
Yes.
That go into it. And something happened at Pickwick last year with an angler being way up a creek, and they had to go prove that they could get there from the main lake after the fact.
Did they?
They did.
They did. So the angler was right.
The angler had GoPro video
mm-hmm.
to prove, as far as I know,
okay,
that they got to their spot. So,
but it still made them at least think about it and say, we might want to address this right now.
Yeah,
and do the
and it was. They were way up the creek. It was way up a creek. But like I said, there's creeks that flow into Pickwick that are really, really long, and that's not even counting Yellow Creek that connects to the Tom Bigby.
Okay, all right. So strategy-wise, now we've got your off limits. Yeah. Now we've got the dedicated launch sites.
Yeah.
Any other rule changes that go towards at least changing your strategy? Because we're going to get talking strategy here in a second.
Well, those are the main two. Those were the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
There may be some more. There was the off limits and the communication kind of went hand in hand. So that's,
those
like I said,
ones.
Those are the two big ones that changed the way, you could strategize. For me, the dedicated launches was the big one.
Right.
That would change the way you strategize. And that's what I talked about, the risk reward thing of, if you got a good spot, but it's going to take you 2 hours to get there, are you willing to give up those 2 hours of fishing
mm-hmm.
to get to that spot and get to those what you think you can catch?
I want to transition into, we're still on strategy, But now I want to pick your brain as far as being an angler.
Okay.
Okay. Do you consider yourself a finesse guy, a power guy, or you're just a little bit of everything?
Finesse.
You're a finesse guy. All right. Favorite lure to use?
Shaky head.
Shaky head. Okay.
I wouldn't say it's a boring. It can be a boring lure to use, but it's effective.
Oh, it is, absolutely. Yeah, everybody ought to know how to fish a shaky head effectively. All right, so being a finesse guy, let's say you've got a new body of water. Let's say Lake X. You've never been on it. You're not going to have any time to pre-fish.
Okay.
How does Andy Middleton, from a mental aspect, start preparing for this tournament?
Map study.
Map study. Okay.
Yeah, the first thing I'm going to do is look at Google Maps or Google Earth, and if I'm down in my office, I'll have two screens up. I'll have one with Google Maps and one with the Navionics webpage, and I'll be looking at some of those contour lines to find good transition points.
Yeah, that was my next question. What are you looking for?
Yeah, well, it depends on the time of year. When's this tournament going to be?
Let's just say, okay, so it's July, so we're in the middle of summer, almost August. Let's say it's at the end of August.
Okay.
So you're still hot.
It's still hot.
Still hot. So what are you looking for?
I'm going to look for an area. If I'm just showing up there to fish with no practice, I'm going to look for an area that has a lot of different options as far as cover and structure. I want something probably near a bridge or a marina, so I can fish docks and riprap if I need to. And I want something near deep water with some ledges and some points if I want to fish offshore. And if I don't have any practice time, then I'm going to go out there with an open mind, and probably going to have, I'll. In that case, you do want to cover water a little bit faster, so I might have something like a spinnerbait or a crankbait or something, especially around the riprap and things like that.
Yeah.
But if I'm fishing around those docks, or if I'm trying to do something offshore, I'm probably dragging that worm.
That's a tough question, because I guess it depends upon the body of water.
It does. You got to at the same time that you're doing that map study, you're going to be looking at past tournament results. You're going to be looking at YouTube videos. You're going to be reading about what the forage is in that lake. Is it a herring lake? Is it threadfin? Is it bluegill? What are they eating that time of year?
Right.
Which August, it's probably going to be schooling fish. They're probably focused on bait fish more than anything.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about, you always keep bringing back to the shaky head.
Yeah.
All right. How do you work your shaky head?
I kind of hop it more. I mean, it depends on your bottom composition a lot. If there's a lot of rocks down there, you're gonna just have, if you don't want to get hung, you're gonna just have to try to tick the rocks, But if it's pebbles or something like that, you can kind of drag it slow and count the rocks.
Okay.
But I fish. For me, a shaky head is a finesse presentation that I fish in a little bit of a power way. I don't fish anything under 3/16.
Okay.
Usually my starting point is a 1/4 ounce. So, and I'm not afraid to put a big worm or something on, like a Magnum trick worm or something like that on one. So, I fish it fairly aggressively for a finesse presentation, but I just trust it.
Okay.
I trust that it's going to get bites.
Yeah. What's your rod setup?
I throw it on a casting setup. I have a 6/8 medium extra fast St. Croix Victory that I throw it on, and basically like a sort of what somebody would call probably what somebody would call a BFS reel. It's a Revo MGX, one of the higher end Abu Garcia reels that's capable of throwing something pretty light on a casting setup.
Do you have to change your setup being from a kayak a little bit? I know like some companies like Cash and make like kayak specific rods. Do you do that?
You can cheat up in your action a little bit because the kayak is part of your drag system. If you're working a bank or something, you're throwing a spinnerbait down the bank or a crankbait or something. Normally when you would use, let's say you're throwing a crankbait, normally you would use probably like a pretty parabolic rod, like a moderate action rod to throw a crankbait on. You can cheat up a little bit and use a little bit of a faster tip from a kayak, because you're going to have that compensation of the kayak moving more toward the fish when you set the hook.
That's the first thing I noticed when I fished out of the kayak on Lanier.
Mm-hmm.
Set the hook. You can almost feel the give a little bit of the kayak.
You can feel your kayak moving toward it if it's a big enough fish.
Exactly. So when you set the hook, the kayak, that's the first thing I noticed. Like, whoa, that's a little different.
Yeah.
And then you are right when you say it's part of your drag system, which is an interesting way to say it. I don't know if a lot of guys think about that. You're using the kayak to help kind of fight the fish.
Right, and it can help or hinder, and that's one nice thing about having a pedal drive is, like, if you want to back up, to help get the fish out of some heavy stuff.
Yeah.
If you're trying to get it out of a tree or get it out of a grass mat, then you can back pedal and not have to pick up a paddle or something and
that's a lot of thinking, though, going out there, getting your feet to work with your brain.
No, with my 360, I can just turn a handle and I can back pedal off a bank and get that fish out of the cover, and let him wear himself out before I try to net him.
That makes sense. What is the least favorite thing that you like to throw out of a kayak?
Probably a crankbait.
Really?
A bigger crankbait, like a deep diver.
Yeah.
Because there is so much pull. There's so much tension against that bait when you're trying to grind it down on the bottom. You can be throwing a 6XD or something out of a kayak, and you're only getting maybe 2/3 of the diving depth out of it, just because that kayak is so hard to fish a deep diver out of.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I don't throw deep divers much. One thing for that reason, and two, I'd rather throw like a swing head or a shaky head or something like that.
Okay. That leads me into this, your comment there leads me into this mindset and these following questions. I'm going to name a bait. We'll start off with a shaky head.
Okay.
And I want you to give a tip for guys on throwing it out of a kayak and maybe a con. You know what I'm saying? Give me a pro and a con for each bait.
Okay, so when you're fishing out of a kayak, you're not going to be able to cover as much water. You're not going to be able to run 2 miles down a point. You're not going to be able to hop around the whole lake like you would on a bass boat. So with a shaky head, as I talked about earlier, it gets bites. So if you really want to pick apart an area, then a shaky head's a good lure to do that with.
Okay, what's a con?
A con is, I can't think of many cons
That's
to throwing a
good.
shaky
Hey,
head,
if
but
there's
the
no
one,
con.
if there's grass, you kind of, if
Okay.
there's grass growing off the bottom, you got to figure something else out.
Okay, let's stay we're subsurface a little bit. Crankbait, I think. Give me the pro and the con again. Let's go with something more like a rock crawler or
something with a little
bill.
more,
Yeah,
a little more drag to it.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. With the crankbait, it's like I said, it's a lot of times it's hard, especially if you're using a rod that's got a little slower tip on it to help keep them pinned. Once they are hooked, it's kind of hard to get a good hook set out of the kayak, just because that kayak's going to move toward the fish when you pull.
Right, makes sense. All right, spinnerbait.
Spinnerbait, I can't think of many negative things to say about a spinnerbait.
You throw a trailer hook?
No.
You do not?
No.
Do you do you put anything like a Kayak or a trailer on it?
I do.
You do.
I'll put either a swim bait or a fluke style, like something like the spunk shad.
Okay. All right. What would be a con on a spinnerbait? Nothing. You love it that much?
When you're throwing a spinnerbait in the river, I've found sometimes it has more of a tendency to turn over on you, especially if you're throwing something with a Colorado blade.
Okay.
And you're throwing a lighter weight, like maybe a 3/8 or a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait. If you're throwing it across a current seam or something like that, you can just sit there and kind of watch those blades turn over and it kind of flip around on you, as as opposed to if you're throwing a chatterbait, it's going to run pretty true.
All right. Well, that leads me into this question: spinnerbait or chatterbait?
Spinnerbait if I'm fishing around wood.
Okay.
Chatterbait if I'm fishing grass.
Okay.
Or rocks.
If you could only fish one of those two baits for the rest of your life, would you take a spinnerbait or a chatterbait? That's a big debate in the fishing world now.
I would say a spinnerbait.
Okay. Think it's more versatile?
You can throw it around wood. I mean, you can throw a chatterbait around wood. The jackhammer's fine around wood normally, but it has more of a tendency to get hung. If you put a beaver-style bait on a chatterbait and rig it with the flat part where it will go over the log or something like that, you can get away with using a chatterbait a little more, but around the wood.
Okay.
But I would say spinnerbait just because I think it's just a little bit more versatile, especially if you bump up the weight to a 1 or 1 1/4 ounce. You can ledge fish with it and stuff like that.
Okay,
too.
good answer. Top water.
Buzzbait.
Are we still black?
I will throw a white too now.
You will throw a white. I do remember the conversation from back in the day. You loved black buzzbaits.
There's only 2 colors of buzzbaits, black and black. Right?
Black and black is what you said, but now you've transitioned to a little bit of a white here and there.
Yeah, I mean, if they're on a bait fish deal, I mean, it's kind of stupid not to throw a white one.
I understand. When you rig up a buzzbait, again, no trailer hook.
No trailer hook.
Still throwing a
straight tail.
Straight tail. Okay, straight tail on that. All right. What about jerkbait?
I'm not very good at jerkbait fishing.
Don't like it. I'm not
saying I don't like it. I'm just saying I don't have very much confidence in it. Now, Steve-O, who we talked about, that runs the trails, he loves jerkbait fishing, and he's got a ton of confidence in one. I've just not caught that many fish on. I
find that jerkbait guys fall into 2 categories: either guys that love it or guys that hate it. I'm on the guys that hate it side. I don't have any confidence in it either.
If I got in the right situation and got on a good pattern with it, I'm sure I could develop some more confidence in it. But I've just not caught that many fish on them.
Right.
Personally. If it's a fluke though, I caught a ton of fish on a fluke, and that's just a soft.
I was
jerkbait.
getting ready to go to that. Do you throw flukes?
Yes. I may or may not have won a tournament at Hartwell.
Is that what you won your tournament on with a fluke? Maybe. How do you rig your fluke?
That tournament I was rigging a donkey rig double.
Okay.
But normally if I'm throwing a single fluke, I'm going to use a belly weighted, like a 1/8 or a 3/32 ounce belly weighted hook.
Okay.
And just walk the dog under subsurface.
The donkey rig. A lot of people will throw it. A lot of people still don't understand what it is. But when you do throw it, any changes you have to make, like with your rod, you throw it on the same rod pretty much?
Yeah, I'm throwing it on a casting setup, similar to what I throw my shaky head on, actually, because it's a single hook presentation. And it's fairly heavy wire. But I'm throwing it on like a medium.
Okay.
And
when would you throw the donkey rig as opposed to a single fluke?
Herring spawn.
Okay, so they were spawning up there.
Yeah.
So this would have been in the spring of the year.
Yeah, it was tax day. It was April 15th.
April 15th.
Yeah.
Are you in the camp of throwing, when you throw your flukes, say a white color in low light conditions and you change the shad colors, or?
I've got about 3 fluke colors I use no matter what.
Yeah. And you don't have to give them out. I just want to know if you change based upon the sunlight? No.
No. If it's sunny, I'll use one with some glitter in it. Mm-hmm. If it's cloudy, I'll use one that's more flat.
Okay. You got a particular brand you like to throw as far as flukes?
Zoom.
Throwing zooms. What about your shaky heads?
I'll throw a Gamakatsu shaky head. It's the skip gap. Mm-hmm. There is a bait I will throw on a shaky head where I do want the spring lock and an EWG. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say what bait it is.
That's okay. I understand.
But if I'm just throwing a straight tail worm, I'll use that Gamakatsu skip gap. And I used to throw all Zoom trick worms pretty much. And if they were short striking it, I'd just bite it down.
Yeah.
And use a shorter worm. But I've kind of moved over to the net bait T-Mac.
Okay.
As far as it's a little longer than the Zoom trick worm, and I feel like I catch bigger fish. I mean, it's a bigger worm. And I feel like my average fish size is I'm not catching as many dinks.
Right, okay. So I know that spotted bass lakes like Lanier, everybody throws a shaky head. Very few people throw a Texas rig. Now, when you get on to the more largemouth lakes or areas that you fish, do you ever transition over to a Texas rig, or do you stay shaky head all the time?
I'll throw a Texas rig in a few situations. Like if I go to Seminole or something like that and I'm flipping cypress trees or fishing grass or something like that, I'll throw a creature bait on a Texas rig if I'm flipping trees. If I'm just kind of swimming like a speed worm over the grass, I'll throw a Texas rig doing that. And then if I'm back in a creek somewhere flipping wood, I'm gonna throw a Texas rig.
Okay. So in preparation for tournaments, lake versus river, any differences?
Yeah, definitely some differences. The tackle I bring for a river tournament is not going to be quite as much. I'm going to try to lighten my load a little bit, bring a little bit less tackle, and maybe fewer rods. Like I might take 9 or 10 or 11 rods out on the lake for a tournament, and I might try to limit it to 4 or 5, for a river tournament. I just want to lighten my load as much as possible and keep it simple.
Yeah.
When I fish a river.
Now, are you still throwing the same kind of baits, shaky heads, in a river compared to a lake?
Yeah, shaky head's one of my favorite river
In
baits.
a river, really?
Yeah.
Now, still, you just mentioned the net baits, it was a little bit bigger. You still throwing that bigger sized worm in a river, or are you downsizing?
A lot of times I'll downsize. I might put a crawl or something like that on it, even so. Just kind of letting the fish tell me what they want. I'm going to start with like a trick worm or something, and if they're eating that well, then I'm not going to change it up.
What about a Ned rig?
I don't throw Ned rigs very much. What I've compromised to do is Picasso makes a really tiny shaky head. It's just a ball head with a screw lock on it, and I call it, I've kind of nicknamed it my shaky Ned. So I can put like a turd or whatever, or one of those Ned baits on that little shaky head.
Okay. And
I feel like it gives me, I think it gets me hung up less.
Okay.
I don't, and a lot of people that fish the Neds now use those weedless EWG
That's right, yep.
Ned heads anyway. So to me, a Ned head is just a tiny shaky head. That's all it is.
Okay, makes sense. What about the jig?
I throw a jig every now and then. I was in a tournament one time out at Brushy Branch, and I could not get bit on a shaky head. And I picked up a jig, and I caught 5 in like 45 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. So it's just maybe they were on crawfish that day or something. But I couldn't believe it. Usually if you can catch them on a jig, you can catch them on a shaky head. But it was just the opposite that day. Sometimes you just want, you got to switch it up and keep an open mind. But I'll trust a jig.
You throw a full size jig, or are you into the camp of throwing these like micro jigs?
I really like those smaller Kayak jigs. Yeah. The tungsten heads, but I'll still throw them. I'm not throwing like an 1/8 ounce or something. I'm still throwing like a half ounce.
But
jig,
you like the smaller profile.
But it's like a finesse. Yeah, I do like a finesse jig.
Okay. From a kayak guy to a boater, what is one mistake you think you see a lot of boaters make? I'm just curious. Like you're sitting there on a kayak and you're watching this boater come in, and boaters do like to run and gun. I know you guys got to pick a spot a little bit, and that might be your answer. But what do you see a mistake you see boaters make all the time?
Coming off pad when they go by us.
Oh, okay. Oh.
I'd rather them stay on pad.
Okay, so they don't kick up as many waves and stuff.
Yeah. They're trying to, they're trying to be nice. And they're trying to be courteous by coming off pad and going slow when they get near us, but we'd actually rather them just go on by.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, because they're going to put out a lot more wake if they're going stern of their boat's actually in the water.
That makes sense. I had not thought about that till you just said that. Yeah, and they're trying to be nice.
Yeah, they're doing it to be courteous, but they don't realize that we'd rather actually them go by on pad.
Okay, so if you're a boater, hey, there's your tip. Now, don't go blowing by them 10 foot next to them.
Exactly, yeah. Don't spray me, but
don't spray you.
That has happened, by the way.
Seriously?
Yeah, somebody on Chickamauga. Chickamauga's the worst.
Really?
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Let's talk a little bit about the respect, though, between boaters and kayakers. I generally can tell when I'm out if a kayak guy, knows what he's doing, and we give each other room, and it's very easy. But instances where maybe that doesn't happen, you probably experience that a lot more because you fish from a kayak a lot.
Yeah.
How is the etiquette out there between boaters and kayakers these days?
For the most part, 90% of the time, there's, you're out there to do the same thing. There's mutual respect. Mm-hmm. But, I think on both sides you're gonna have jerks on both sides. There's jerks that fish out of kayaks and there's jerks that fish out of boats.
Yeah.
And you see it from both sides.
Right.
it's hard. I don't really pay attention to what they do. I mean,
Yeah.
I might see them pull up into my area and catch a fish or something like that. When I was sitting there, the second day of that Hartwell tournament, I was sitting there, and we couldn't cast until 7 that morning. So I'm sitting on my point, power pole down on my point, and the boat pulls in and starts catching fish in front of me.
Oh, man, that would have made me mad.
And I couldn't do jack crap about it because it's sitting there, I'm looking at the clock at 6:53 or something, and I'm watching this boat sit on the point that I'm trying to fish.
They just ignored you?
And what my deal was on that one, they were, I was on the flat part of the point up near the bank. I mean, it was those fish were in, foot and a half of water. I'm power poled down, sitting off the point, ready to cast, and of course this boat comes in. They can't get as shallow as I'm sitting anyway, but they're off on the same point. Turns out they were catching stripers, but still
right.
And the camera boat, Bassmaster's camera boat came and they kind of figured out what was going on then when the camera boat showed up, and they kind of tucked tail and ran. I guess they didn't want to be on camera.
I guess so. For somebody that's wanting to get into bass fishing from a kayak, what are some pointers, some advice you could give them? Brand new guy.
That's a good question. I would say if you're in the market for a kayak, I would recommend going to one of the local shops around, like the Dugout or somebody else that's got a way to demo a boat. Get your butt in a seat and then get out on the water. See what you like, see what you don't like. Shop around. Be patient before you buy one. You don't have to spend a fortune on it and rig up a $15,000-$20,000 kayak like some of us tournament guys do.
Right.
But spend a little money to get something quality, and then if you want to upgrade, if you want to change kayaks later, if you want to put mods on it, then do it little by little. Don't just go to the store, get your kayak, but go fishing a couple of times before you figure out how you want to accessorize it. You may not need 5 or 6 rod holders. You may, I'll see people go and get it fully rigged or something and have 5 or 6 rod holders and all this stuff on it they'll probably never use, and they end up de-rigging more than they rig.
Okay, that's a good point.
So go out and get a feel for it and figure out little by little what you want, how you want to set it up for the way you fish.
Yeah, and we'll give a little plug right here to the Dugout. They have a little pond right beside their shop.
Correct.
That you can actually get the kayak in, swim around in it a little bit, kind of get the feel for it,
right,
and then make a decision.
Right, and Dugout started as a Hobie dealership only, but now they've added Jackson and Old Town kayaks to their lineup. So they've got some options there other than Hobie now as well.
Now, how big is your kayak? The one you fish out of, not your inflatable one.
The bigger one, the plastic.
Yeah, the plastic one.
It's 12 feet.
12 feet. All right, is that about the right size for you? Is that what most people use?
Yeah, that's a good average size. I mean, that's kind of in the middle of everything. A lot of the guys that want to fish bigger water have the motors. They'll go with the Pro Angler 14.
Okay.
And there's so many kayaks on the market now, but most of the ones you see are going to be somewhere from that 12 to 14 foot range, especially if you're on bigger water. Now you'll see some boats that are more catered to river fishing and stuff like that in the 10 to 11 foot range.
That was my next question. What's the difference between one that you would fish in a lake and one you'd fish in a river?
Well, you want stability either way, but as far as the length of the boat, the longer kayaks are mainly catered more toward bigger water fishing, flat water fishing, just because they're going to track better the longer they are.
Okay.
Shorter kayaks are going to turn on a dime a little better. So if you're in a shoal or something, you're trying to dodge rocks and weave around that labyrinth of current.
Right.
A shorter kayak's going to serve you a little better.
Okay.
And 12 foot falls kind of into that happy medium.
Use yours for both?
I do. I'll take my PA into the river. I mean, like I said, I have that inflatable, the iTrack that I use, for throw and go type stuff, for short trips, or just fun fishing or recreational stuff too. If out with the kids or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, if I'm tournament fishing, I'm most likely in that PA.
Would you recommend somebody start out on a lake before a river, or does it matter?
I mean, if you're coming from a whitewater background like me, I mean, you can jump. I'm
a brand new guy. I have no experience in a kayak.
No experience in a kayak. I would recommend you go to an electric only lake like Zwerner or Rocky or something like that, or Hickory Log or whatever, whatever your local electric only lake is, to just kind of get your sea legs a little bit and figure out, your tipping points and stuff like that. You can go to the beach at Lake Ackworth with nothing on your kayak, flip it intentionally, go out in the summertime, flip the thing intentionally, and see how easy it is to bail it out or turn it back over. So that way you kind of know your limits.
Okay. Would you rather fish, if you could only have one way to fish for the rest of your life, would you rather it be a lake or a river?
I'll probably have to say a river, because that's kind of where my heart is, and that's what I like to do. I feel like fish are more predictable in rivers because because of the current. You've got all that current that's going to position those fish more predictably than they might in a lake. But sometimes, I don't want to be on a river with, class 2 rapids or something like that in the middle of January. And I will fish in the wintertime.
Right. But it makes sense. Yeah, you don't get cold if you flip that thing. Have you ever flipped one of your fishing kayaks?
I've not flipped one of my fishing kayaks. I've flipped whitewater kayaks many, many times. But no, I've knock on wood, have not flipped a fishing kayak.
Real quick, I
fell off of one.
Yeah, fell off of one. Well, are they hard to flip back over?
They can be. The wider they are, the harder they are to flip back over. And the trick to that is, if you do flip one, if you imagine it sitting there like a turtle upside down, you want to kind of climb over it, grab the other side
and pull,
and use your body weight to kind of pull it back over from the opposite side that you climb.
That's a good tip. I see it once or twice a year with some buddies of mine who do flip, and they lose everything they got, when they do that, unfortunately. But
most of your stuff you want to keep tethered down.
Yeah. And a PDF, I imagine, is important.
That's essential.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to have the life jacket. That's essential. I mean, you're going to get disqualified from any tournament where you're not wearing a life jacket.
Oh, okay. So that's a requirement the entire tournament. 100%. Okay. That is
probably first rule in the book in every trail.
Now, do you wear an inflatable or?
No, I wear a regular foam PFD.
Okay. Just feel better with that.
A little more confident. I would wear one of the inflatable ones. Now, I don't think they let you wear the belt kind. It's got to be the kind that kind of like goes over your shoulders.
Yeah.
I would be okay probably wearing one of those if I'm in my PA on a lake or something like that. But if I'm in a river, I'm probably wearing the old school foam.
Safety first. Safety first as always.
I have kids. I don't want to. I want to get back to them.
I understand. That's important.
Yeah.
I want to hit the Georgia Bass Slam real quick.
Okay.
I know we talked about it more extensive on an earlier podcast.
Yeah.
But real quick, for somebody that doesn't know what that is, tell them what the Georgia Slam is.
All right. So it's a program that the Georgia DNR has where they encourage you to get out and try to catch every black bass species that lives here in our state. There are 10 of them. I've caught 8 of them. There's still 2 I've not caught in the 6 or 7 years they've been doing the program. But, I try to do it every year. I think there's only been 1 year. I think 2021 maybe was the only year I've not been able to get it.
So the basic of the program is you can get a certificate if you catch 4 of the species, right?
It's 5.
It's 5. 5 of the 10 species in Georgia.
Yeah.
You do that pretty much every year.
I try to do it every year.
But you're trying to go for that lifetime or that you get all 10. What 2 are you not catching? Or actually, tell everybody what 10 species, if you can do it off the top of your head.
Okay, I'll try to do this off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So you count them for me.
I am. I got my hands.
Right.
Here we go.
You got largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass / they got spot in Alabama in the same category.
Okay.
Okay, so largemouth, smallmouth, spot, shoal bass, red eye.
Okay, that's 5.
Which is your Coosa-based red eye, just plain old red eye.
Okay.
Chattahoochee bass,
Yep.
Tallapoosa bass, Bartram bass,
Yep.
Altamaha bass, and Swanee bass.
There you go. That's 10. So
Okay.
you got them now. The 2 that you haven't caught.
The last two I mentioned, the Altamaha and the Swanee.
Now, where are they located in Georgia?
The Swanee bass is going to be in South Georgia because it's named after the Swanee River drainage that runs through Florida into the Gulf of Mexico. So there's only a couple of rivers in Georgia that feed into the Swanee. One's around Thomasville, one's around Valdosta. You have to go to South Georgia to catch it.
Okay. And then the other one was the Altamaha. That's
the Altamaha bass is again named for that drainage. You're probably not going to find them in the Altamaha proper, but you have the Oconee and the Okmulgee that flow together to form the Altamaha. Mm-hmm. So above the fall line, down below like Sinclair Dam or Jackson Dam or something like that in the shoals, and then maybe up in Gwinnett County, Yellow River or something like that.
Okay.
That's probably going to be your best bet to find one of those. I've not caught one yet though.
The last time we spoke, you had talked about you hooked one of those.
Altamaha.
Was that what it was? Was Ultima, yeah. And you almost got it in?
Yeah, it bounced off the deck of my kayak. Yeah, that was I think that was in the Alcovey River.
Okay, all right. So it's a pretty impressive program that they've got going, but it does encourage people to get out and fish.
Yeah, and where these little red eye species live or subspecies is what you were talking about. Some of those really beautiful areas up in, you can go chase red eyes up in the Cohuttas.
Oh, okay.
Jacks River, Conasauga, up that way, there's going to be red eyes in there probably living with the trout. Same thing with the Upper Etowah.
Do they have on the website, DNR's website, like a picture of each one of the species so somebody can identify it?
They do. If you go to that website, they've got identifier pictures, and they've even got, I think they've got like a blog or something where people have given you tips and tricks of where to look for certain ones.
So let's transition back before I end this podcast up back to the tournament scene a little bit.
All right.
What are you fishing again?
I'm fishing mostly the Bassmaster Kayak Series.
Yep.
It's the National Trail. I've fished two of those, Gunnersville and Hartwell.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fishing a lot of the state stuff, state Bassmaster.
Tell me a little bit about the state stuff. I know you got your list there of some tournaments that are going on. Tell me a little bit about that.
Right. There's one state tournament left on the Georgia Bass Nation Trail. It's going to be in, I believe it's mid-September. It's on Lake Sinclair. That's going to be your last chance to qualify for the state championship on Seminole, which is in November. If you finish in the top certain, I don't know what percentage it is, but if you finish in the top percentage there, you get to move on to the Bassmaster Kayak Championship, which is going to be in Oklahoma. It's held on the same week as the Classic. The awards ceremony is at the same venue as the Classic before they bring the elite guys out on Friday.
Okay. All right. And you got a list of tournaments is it PSA or
PSKA, Peach State Kayak Anglers?
Yeah.
Their next tournament is, I'll be in it. Their next tournament's coming up on August 12th, and it's their River Rumble. So they're going to give you the option of 5 or 6 different rivers that you can fish, and you can either pick the river that's near you, so you don't have to drive a long way, or if you want to go to the Savannah River and catch smallmouth, you can go do that, or if you want to go to the Flint, catch shoalies.
That's pretty awesome.
You got lots of options there. You got several options.
So you still link though, no matter what. If you're catching shoalies compared to somebody catching spots, compared to somebody catching largemouth.
Yeah, I mean you want to be catching those 18 to 20 inch fish if you're in the tournament for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I like the variety. That is one thing about the kayak scene that I do like. You guys have a lot of variety.
We do.
Compared to the bass guys or the bank guys, kayak guys seem to be able to fish a lot more bodies of water in a lot more different places.
And that's one thing that, as the sport grows and, we've got these big tournament trails out there, that's one thing that hopefully a lot of the directors will keep in mind when they're talking to these jurisdictions and these communities, these Chamber of Commerce people that might want to bring a tournament into town. We don't necessarily have to go to Gunnersville and St. Clair and all these lakes that you see on the schedule every single year. We've had the Hobie. They went, instead of going up to the Mississippi River when they go to Wisconsin, they did the Wolf and Fox rivers in Wisconsin last year. And so instead of La Crosse, they were in a different city in Wisconsin. So they're getting, they're exposing some of these waterways that don't get a lot of exposure through MLF or bass,
Right.
Through the Elite Series or the Opens or something. So we try to use that to our advantage. And fishing the Upper Susquehanna, that's a world class smallmouth fishery that the big boat trails are never going to get to go to.
Okay, I think that's awesome. I'm gonna ask you one more question. I always like to ask everybody a question that I can make a TikTok out of.
Okay.
You got to think social media. You got to think big.
You're going to have to tell me how to get on TikTok to watch it then.
I will do this. All right. What is the biggest mistake anglers make?
The biggest mistake anglers make? Maybe they're fishing too fast, because there was a friend of mine that was didn't have a lot of confidence in the jackhammer or the chatterbait, and he said he was going to go out to one of the lakes and just take a jackhammer and nothing else. And I said, I just commented on his post. I said, fish it slow it down, tick the bottom. Don't be afraid to tick the bottom with it. And sure enough, he's like, thanks, dude. Like, message me.
Yeah.
Like, thanks for saying that, man.
No, that's a great answer. Absolutely. Okay, well, Andy, I appreciate you coming by, spending a little time with me. It's always a good time when you come up here to the shop, and for sitting in, giving me an hour or so of your time, and being willing to answer a few questions here and there.
Yeah, it's always good to catch up.
It is, and again, we'll probably do this in another couple years, and we'll just see how life progresses with those kids, and if you still got time to fish, once ball starts and all that stuff.
We've had the oldest one in baseball for a couple of years now, and I actually got into the coaching a little bit this year, and I enjoyed it. That was so rewarding.
It is. I did that for all three of my kids.
Yeah.
The problem is, if you do it all the way up to high school, then all of a sudden, when the high school coaches take over, you have nothing to do on your Tuesday and Thursday nights. And you're like, what do I do now?
Right.
But a good answer is going to fish. So
go fish.
Dude, I tell you what, I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure. You got to reach over and shake that hand. All right, guys. Hey, we appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching this on YouTube, hey, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Click that notification bell if you're listening to this on iTunes or Spotify. Hey, we appreciate you guys as well. Be safe. Go out there and have some fun fishing. Give a kayak a try. It might be the right thing to do for you. So
hi, sass. Hi, kids.
There you go. All right, we will see you guys on the next one. Appreciate you.